All right. Perfect. All right, welcome. Let's go ahead and get started with the agenda. But before we do that, actually, I need to introduce myself because some of you don't know who I am. So my name is Tanya. My pronouns are she, her, ella. I'm the grant programs manager here at the fund. And I'm excited to welcome you all. And I'm excited to share this information with you and hopefully answer any and all of the questions that you may have. Today, we're going to be covering a brief background of the fund. We'll go over a funding model and the folks that make the funding decisions. We'll talk about the fund strategies, the capacity building program, and the Central Coast Regional Equity Initiative. We'll give a brief overview of our grant making programs, and we'll also be diving deep into the fall grant application. We'll go over the cycle timeline, and then at the end, in addition to encouraging you to ask questions throughout the presentation, we'll also have some time at the end for Q&A. By the end, we do hope that this presentation helps you determine if the fund is a good fit for your request. And please just also keep in mind that if the fund is not a good fit, we are still able to support you in other ways. And we'll talk about our capacity building program. And Kathleen is here to share some insight with you on that. And lastly, if you are here to learn about grant writing in general, this workshop may not be what you were looking for. However, we do have a workshop series recording on our website that does address grant seeking, and Patricia is dropping that link in the chat for you if you'd like to learn more about grant seeking in general. All right. Let's get started with the fund. I've already introduced myself. This is our entire team, and I have two wonderful colleagues with me here today. I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves. Patricia?
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Tanya. Patricia Solorio. I'm Associate Director here at the Fund for Santa Barbara. I just had my 5th year anniversary. So I'm excited for this as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathleen Knight, pronouns she, her, ella. I'm the capacity building manager with the Fund for Santa Barbara, and super excited to be here with you all today.
Yes, thank you both so much for being here to support. They'll be monitoring the chat as well as dropping links to references we make throughout the presentation, and also answering any questions you may have. Our team is small and mighty, and these are the rest of the folks. As you can see, we have different programs and different specialties that we carry with us at the fund. All of our contacts information is available on the website. So if you see a specific group, for example, like Youth Making Change, and you want to talk to David about youth-led programs, his email is on the website, and I encourage you to reach out. Okay, I'm going to pass it off to Kathleen to talk more about the fund.
Thanks so much, Tanya. So first of all, I just want to start off by highlighting and reminding you all that we are a countywide organization, and we do have 2 offices, one in Northern Santa Barbara County and one in Southern Santa Barbara County. Both of our offices are now partially open, and this slide shows our updated office hours. We love having community come by into the office, meeting you in person, but do ask that if you plan on making a trip to either of our offices, we encourage you to call ahead to ensure that someone will be there to greet you. Next slide, please. So diving in a little bit to the history of the Fund for Santa Barbara. Now, the Fund for Santa Barbara is a non-traditional community foundation that was founded in 1980. We support organizations and groups working for progressive social change in Santa Barbara County. Through our mission, the fund advances progressive change by strengthening movements for economic, environmental, political, racial, and social justice. We were founded in the post-civil rights era. Our founders were all supporters and activists of different social justice movements, like the Chicano rights movement, the feminist movement, the LGBTQ movements, the environmental movements, and so on. Through their activism, they learned that foundations almost never supported their activist-led progressive work, their politically engaged work, or work that was considered more controversial. Our founders were also aware of the systems of oppression in the world of philanthropy and conceptualized an alternative community foundation model that combated the history of traditional foundations. Next slide, please. Here are some unique features of the fund. The first thing to note is that we're a fundraising nonprofit. Unlike most foundations that have a large underwriter or endowment, we fundraise the budget that we grant to the community annually. We do have a small endowment. However, most of our funding does come from donations, grants, and so on. But we are very proud of the support that comes in from our individual donors. We ask a lot of questions when taking private dollars, and we expect donors to walk their talk, so there aren't any strings attached to the dollars we receive and therefore give out. To us, fundraising is organizing, and this helps keep us in tune with the organizations we support. It's the reason why we doubled our grants during the 2007 recession and tripled our emerging needs grants budget in 2020 at the start of the pandemic. The second thing to note about the fund is that we are unabashedly progressive. We do not pretend to be neutral. Our motto is change, not charity. We understand that social conditions improve most dramatically when those who have been denied power and justice lead on their own behalf to confront, challenge, and change the conditions that have denied them access to justice and equity. Our mission is directly looking to support social change projects that address the root causes of social inequities and the underlying conditions and circumstances that bring them about. If this is unclear at the moment, don't worry, we'll speak more on this throughout the presentation. Lastly, another unique feature of the fund is our activist-led decision-making model. These are the folks who are in charge of making our funding decisions. And I'll now hand it over to Tanya to share more about our awesome grant-making committee.
Yes. Let's see. So yes, that's correct. The fund is the only foundation in Santa Barbara County that uses a participatory decision-making model. The final funding recommendations are selected by the grant-making committee. Fund staff like myself, Patricia, and Kathleen don't have the authority to make grants. And this is good news because it allows us to be able to provide technical support and assistance to applicants like yourselves. Think of staff as an ally in your approach to the grant-making committee. The grant-making committee themselves are an inspired group of volunteers with deep roots in our communities. They represent the entire region from North County all the way to South County and everything in between. They are community activists who are on the ground doing the work and understand the of, by, and for approach to support historically marginalized community members. They have a range of expertise on issues that affect our communities, and they bring their unique insights to the deliberation process. Most importantly, they are your audience when writing a proposal to the fund. Each application we receive is read by at least 15 people. I share all this with you because we want you to keep in mind who your audience is as you're drafting your proposal to the fund. We believe this is an important piece of drafting a successful proposal. On the screen, you have the names of all of the grant-making committee members. If you would like to learn more about them and read their bios, please visit our website. There you can find out more about the incredible work that they're doing in the community and learn more about who they are as individuals. Kathleen is going to talk to you about the strategies that we use at the fund to advance our mission.
So as Tanya mentioned, we employ 5 main strategies here at the Fund for Santa Barbara. The first is grant making, which is what we're best known for and why you're probably here today. But there are other ways that we support groups aside from funding. One of those ways is through building capacity of progressive organizations to help them be bold and effective. We host workshops and convenings like our funders briefings and activist brown bag lunches, which I'll share more about in a moment. We offer things like direct consulting and an online community calendar where you can promote your upcoming events. We have information libraries with books on best practices for organizations and other topics that you can borrow. And we also convene a variety of educational workshops, peer-to-peer learning networks, and educational cohorts. Some of the other strategies we employ include nurturing coalitions, which we do by being a hub for convening collaborative efforts and sharing as a trusted table to convene people and groups for strategy, resource sharing, and inspiration. This includes things like the Central Coast Immigrants' Rights Coalition and the Economic Justice Working Group. We also are committed to influencing philanthropy by advocating for more progressive approaches to philanthropy to support community organizing and movement building. This looks like unrestricted funding, access to resources for grassroots-led work. We like to think of this as growing the pie rather than creating more slices. And lastly, we also employ leadership development so that social justice movements and the progressive philanthropy sector look like the communities we serve: diverse, intergenerational, and values-driven. From our Youth Making Change program to our internship program, the Grant Making Committee, our board of directors, and our staff, we all emphasize leadership development. Next slide, please. Now I want to focus in on capacity building and tell you a bit more about our capacity building program. We have a variety of program workshop offerings. Currently, we're hosting the Making Movements DEI program series, which focuses on intersectional approaches to movement building through an equity lens. There's still time to register for our 3rd week, and I'd love to see you all at our Breaking Binaries program. We also have a variety of resources and recordings on the Fund's website, which include past capacity building workshops, including the workshop that Tanya shared in regards to social change grant writing. We also partner with the Nonprofit Resource Network for sector-wide resources and connections into the Central Coast networks. We also offer free one-on-one technical assistance and consulting services. Patricia will drop a link in the chat here where you can book some one-on-one time. We also host an informal online activist brown bag munch group. This is a monthly convening space for local activists, organizers, community members, and neighbors working for social change and justice. It's a free-flowing space to share work, seek resources and support, and engage with advocacy work. We meet every last Thursday of the month from 12 to 1:30 p.m. via Zoom, and you can email me to join our group. Next slide, please. Our capacity building work is also deeply grounded in our Central Coast Regional Equity Initiative. We're working collectively to advance equity in the Central Coast through the Central Coast Regional Equity Initiative, and encourage you to leverage this initiative's framework and data in your grant proposals to the fund. This is an effort informed by community-based research to understand intersectional inequity in Santa Barbara and Ventura counties. These findings are presented in the study entitled Towards a Just and Equitable Central Coast. We encourage you to engage with the report and utilize the data to your advantage to leverage funding, resources, connections in your own work and network, as well as to help fulfill your mission. Next slide, please. All of the information is very much rooted in intersectionality and guided by a framework of principles and priorities for intersectional equity. A variety of issues are discussed in the report, but it is by no means exhaustive. I've included here the table of contents for you to get a little peek inside the report to see what kind of information is available, as well as the framework that guides the initiative. I really encourage you to please schedule one-on-one time with me. I'll go through your grant request and can help you start to pull information from the report that can really help strengthen your proposal and ultimately give you a better chance at getting funded through our grant making committee. Next slide, please. Here are some examples of the data and information in the report. And again, this is a very long report. This is just a small sample of some of the intersectional information that you might find in it. And again, I just really highly encourage you to schedule time with me to talk about including the Regional Equity Initiative information in your grant proposal. And beyond that, we encourage you to use this report and this information and data in general. Use the graphs, the data, the sentences in your own work. This is information that is for the community to leverage. And thanks so much. I'll pass it on over now to Tanya to really dive into our funding programs.
Yeah, thanks, Kathleen. And as she mentioned, I do encourage you to take advantage of taking up some of Kathleen's time to go over your proposals and hopefully utilizing the Central Coast Regional Equity study to bolster your proposals. Kathleen's probably going to be hopping off soon, so thank you so much for being here with us today, Kathleen. All right, let's start diving into our funding programs here at the fund. I'll start by giving you this brief overview of what our funding programs look like. The first one is our single-year grant program, which is offered twice per year in the spring and in the fall. The maximum request is $10,000 and the length of funding is 12 months. The multi-year grants program is typically only offered in the fall, and the maximum request is $10,000 for 3 years, $30,000 total. Emerging needs grants are available on a rolling basis for unforeseen circumstances, and the maximum request is $5,000 for 3 months. And youth making change grants are available in the fall. They have their own cycle, and there's 2 boards, one in North County, one in South County. They each give up to $15,000 out, and the maximum award is $3,000 for youth-led projects. I especially encourage you to keep this grant opportunity in mind if your organization has a youth component with a youth-led initiative. The RFP just launched on Monday, August 1st, and that's going to be available until October 28th or 29th. Late in October is when that closes. Also, this year, we have two new specialty funding programs that I want to share with you. The first is the Racial Equity Fund of Santa Barbara County, which is offered in collaboration with the county. The maximum request is up to $100,000 for up to 3 years, and this funding program is available to organizations or groups that are addressing anti-racism through systems change strategies, meaning that you already have to be doing the work. New initiatives, unfortunately, will not be considered at this time. This year's cycle for the 2022 has already closed. However, we have just been notified that the county granted a second set of funds for us, and we will be launching the cycle again either late this year or early 2023. So please keep that one in mind as well. And the Mickey Flack Social Housing Fund, we just launched about 2 weeks ago. And this is for groups and organizations advocating for and actively leading social housing justice campaigns in Santa Barbara County. There's 4 different funding categories that groups can apply under. For those of you that are familiar with our ENG grant process, the Mickey Flack Fund is similar, meaning that it is open year-round until funds are exhausted, and any groups that are interested in applying are subject to an initial screening by the fund staff. The maximum request is up to $5,000 for 12 months. And to learn more about either one of these, Patricia is going to be putting the links in the chat for you so that you can visit our grant programs page on our website. And I did also want to mention here that if you aren't already registered on our listserv, I encourage you to sign up so that you don't miss any future funding opportunities or any news coming from the fund. And to do that, Patricia will also drop the link in the chat, or you can also find the button to register on our website in the very bottom of any page. When you scroll down, it'll say join our community, and you can enter your email there as well. And then finally, I wanted to mention that to be eligible for any one of our programs, all applicants must meet our funding guidelines and priorities. And I'm going to hand it off to Patricia to talk more about what those are.
Great, thank you, Tanya. So yeah, I'm just going to review our funding guidelines that you can find on our website as well. And just so you know, when we were working on drafting our funding guidelines, we were very intentional in the language that we chose to highlight the type of work that we support. So this goes back to our mission to support social change work that addresses the root causes of social inequities. So you'll want to make sure that you're familiar with the guidelines and that your project addresses or aligns with at least one. They are available again on our website, and you will see them repeatedly addressed throughout the application process and in this presentation today. We invite applicants from organizations that actively support anti-discrimination based on race, sex, gender, age, religion, language spoken, or immigration status. So again, social justice issues are not a monolith. We encourage proposals that are intersectional and can address several issue areas. To learn more about our funding programs, you can visit our website. We also invite applications that actively support communities marginalized by power structures to engage in dialogue and actions that seek to counter social injustice. Examples of this, could be training for parents, youth, farm workers on how to realize their power to affect change on issues that directly affect them. We also invite applicants who actively work to improve the rights of workers and their families whose living conditions have been marginalized. Also who promote cultural life of underserved communities and support the activities of cultural workers. So sometimes when we think about underserved communities, sometimes they're seen as, like joyless, or there's like a lot of blight in these communities. And although that can be, the blight part can be true, it couldn't be further from the truth that underserved communities does not mean that there isn't joy, a lot of joy, and they thrive in many, many ways. Supporting groups that bring light to the joy and richness of these communities is an essential part of the work the fund does. Examples of this are we support the Guelaguetza in Santa Maria, Juneteenth in Santa Barbara, MLK Celebration Committee in Lompoc. I'd also like to highlight the last part, to support the activities of cultural workers. We really encourage folks to honor the cultural workers, artists, musicians, etc., by paying them for their work. So please don't be shy in making, when you're working on your budget and your proposal, to say that you're going to pay folks who are doing paying your artists. We really feel strongly that that is important. So moving on, we also would like to see applications that promote self-determination and leadership development in low-income and disenfranchised communities. We are committed to removing barriers and providing support to folks with lived experience and centering the people who are most affected. We'd like to see applications also that promote global peace and organize locally for just policies. This means everything from engagement on local policies to policies at the state and federal level. There are many national issues that affect our community, and we can advocate locally. Examples of this include women's reproductive rights, climate change, gun control, and after listening to NPR this morning, I will include advocating against nuclear weapons and energies, as that is top of mind right now, and will affect all of us. So working, we also encourage folks, proposals and groups that are working on building coalitions to enhance improving environmental justice. To learn about our, that's in, I think I did something funky with our script, Tanya. To enhance improving, I'm going to start again. So work on building coalitions to enhance improving environmental justice and address climate change, especially organizing a constituency, usually without access to decision makers. So, engage in collaborative action and coalition building to strengthen movement ecosystems, work against community violence, and actively support recovery and restorative justice activities and initiatives. We believe that a key component of real change is movement building, and we strongly support coalition building and across and cross movement solidarity. We really do encourage working together. We're not prescriptive. We're not saying that you have to be collaborating or involved in coalitions, but we believe that strong movement building work is supported by coalition. So again, not being prescriptive, I think that it's important that you understand in your issue area who the other players are, and being able to differentiate how your approach, what your approach to the work is different from how others are doing the work. We encourage folks to apply who are operating in a democratic manner, responsive to and directed by the constituency being served. This to us means that the folks directly impacted by injustices should be involved in the development, identifying strategy, and implementation, and have direct decision-making capacity in those projects and programs. The key here is that we want to support constituency-led work. This can include senior management, staff, committees, etc. So this is also a theme that you'll see throughout the application and through this presentation, that the grant making committee really likes to see the folks who are most affected centered in the work. So moving on to our funding priorities. So we use our funding priorities. By we, I mean the grant making committee uses the funding priorities as they're reading their proposals and um, and throughout the deliberation process. So the questions that they're asking themselves as they read through include, does this project have potential to create or advance social, economic, political, and or environmental change? And then they'll refer back, of course, to the guidelines. We're a movement building foundation, and our guidelines hold our values at their core. And so they'll ask themselves, does this proposal align with the fund's values? And then they'll look at the priorities. What are there elements of community organizing, lobbying, direct action, base building, coalition building, or legal strategies? So we'd like to see at least one of those strategies implemented in the work. And of course, do these strategies address the root cause of issues? They'll ask themselves and each other, does this project have access to other funding? Does this project lack access to traditional funding? Would the project move forward without support from the fund? Given our social change rooted agenda, the grant-making committee prioritizes groups that lack access to more traditional sources of funding, or that use strategies that are typically overlooked by mainstream philanthropies, like legal strategies, lobbying, direct actions, policy and advocacy type work. We are really intentional about supporting grassroots organizations, new emerging organizations, and organizations that aren't necessarily at the top of the list for getting funding from other traditional philanthropists. And then, of course, what is the funding trend of this type of work? So an example that I've been giving is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Prior to 2020, there were, of course, there was work around this area, but certainly after 2020, there was a rise in interest, and of course, a rise in interest of doing the work, but also funding this work. And so I think that if you come to the fund in requesting diversity, equity, and inclusion funding for training for internal either staff or board, we would probably direct you to other philanthropists who are who have funds specifically for this. So we'll talk about, they'll talk about critical timing and need. Does the organization have the capacity to reach their social change? Are the key players familiar with other organizations in the same field to further the goal of movement building? And then we'll talk about the impact of funds. How clear is the budget outline? How well does the budget support the project's social change goals? Will the funding help support, help start up the organization, stabilize an organization, or leverage other funding? And then again, what is the same social change component of the project? And then, of course, they'll consider regional equity. Will this project help the grant-making committee achieve its objectives of providing equity in funding throughout Santa Barbara County? The key is to remember that we support projects with a strong social change component. And then we'll talk a little bit about, we want to talk a little bit about what social change means, at the fund for Santa Barbara, I mean, and just in general. So we define social change as change that addresses systemic root causes of social, economical, environmental, political, and racial inequities in an effort to alleviate those inequities, but also the underlying conditions and circumstances that cause and sustain them. Projects with strong social change component will be working to change the set of conditions that keep societal issues in place. Think of this in contrast to charity or direct service projects that provide a service without addressing the root causes of the issues. An example could be a food bank versus advocacy for a living wage ordinance so that people can actually afford to purchase their own food. Or offering music lessons versus lobbying the school board to allocate money and institutionalize a music program for all students. Offering childcare versus lobbying electeds for affordable childcare programs. And it is not that we have something against direct service. So we understand that direct service is a critical component of the work that nonprofits do. And we need to do both. But we do see that direct service has more access to traditional sources of funding. So we also don't want to discount that direct service has a place in movement building work. And so projects can have a direct service component as long as it is related to social change or to advocacy and lobbying. So some examples could be that you can have food distribution if it's being used as a way to build a base and then mobilize that base. Okay, so
That said,
yeah, thank you.
that said, yeah, of course, we know that there is no black and white line about what constitutes direct service versus social change. And sometimes the most basic charity work or direct service work is actually a social change idea, depending on what else is happening in the community. There's work, for example, that we fund in Santa Maria that we wouldn't fund in Santa Barbara, because we do think context is everything, and we want to be responsive to it. Just keep that in mind. And moving on to what we do not fund. So we don't fund political campaigns that support a candidate or a political party. However, we do fund C3s or C4s lobbying or advocating for ballot measures, for example. And Patricia has been mentioning in the other workshops that to remind folks that we do have a workshop that we host not biannually, every 2 years to encourage tax exempt organizations to engage in this kind of work. If this is in the realm that they do, we host, what's the organization? Alliance for Justice. We host a workshop in collaboration with Alliance for Justice. Again, if you sign up on our listserv, you'll hear about that workshop when it's coming around. We don't fund private versus public interest. We don't fund direct labor organizing. We don't fund direct support to individuals. We don't fund building improvements or capital ventures like machines, vehicles, etc. We don't fund office equipment. And finally, we don't fund projects located outside of Santa Barbara County. The work can, to a degree, be taking place outside of Santa Barbara County, but it has to be directly impacting the communities in Santa Barbara County, if that makes sense. All right, let me talk to you about the eligibility criteria. So, excuse me. In addition to meeting our funding guidelines and priorities, projects must meet specific eligibility criteria. Here are the general applicant qualifications that all applicants must meet in order to be eligible for funding from any one of our programs here at the fund. First, as we just covered, all applicants must meet the funding guidelines and priorities. Applicants must have a tax ID number if applying with tax exempt status or with a fiscal sponsor that is tax exempt. If applying as an unincorporated group, applicants will need an employer identification number. And applicants must have an organizational bank account, or if you're applying with a fiscal sponsor, we'll ask for the fiscal sponsor's bank account information. And then applicants must not be currently funded by the fund, with 2 exceptions, which are the Racial Equity Fund and the Nikki Flack Social Housing Fund. And then your budget and planned activities must fall within the funding timeframe. For example, for this fall general cycle, the funds are dispersed in December, and it's a 12-month funding cycle, funding timeline. So the timeline that we'll ask for in the application will cover activities and budget expenses from December to December 2023. For those of you who are interested in learning more about the multi-year cycle qualifications, as we just mentioned, in addition to meeting the eligibility criteria, the previous eligibility criteria that I just shared, the multi-year cycle qualifications include that a organization that is interested in seeking those funds must have a significant funding history with the fund. And what we qualify as this being that you've been awarded a minimum of 3 grants from the fund in recent history. Your budget and planned activities must fall within the 3-year funding timeframe. So as I just explained, the previous one, I gave the example for the single year. Well, this is a 3-year, so we'll ask for 3 years worth of activities, and then we'll ask for 3 years worth of budgets. And then and then finally, multi-year applications are not available to the public. So if you wish to apply for a multi-year grant, please email grants@fundforsantabarbara.org. I'll have Patricia drop that in the chat, and then that way we can see if you're eligible to apply. And quickly, I did want to highlight that you can find an extensive list of all of the projects that we have funded in recent history on our website. And this can give you an idea of the type of projects that we fund and help you understand more about the types of requests that fit the fund. And Patricia will drop the link in the chat to our grant making history. All right, we're going to start jumping into the application and the multi-year. But before I do want to pause and see if I missed any questions or any questions are arising currently before we move forward that I can address. All right, well, if anything does come up, please don't hesitate to take yourself off of mute and chime in. Okay. So first things first, we have an entirely electronic grant process, and to apply to any one of our grants that are available to the public, you will be redirected from our grantee portal on our website to our grants portal. If you have visited our website in recent history, you will probably have noticed that on the menu bar in the top, there is a top right corner button that says grantee portal. That's where we keep all of the current updates for all of our current funding opportunities and any upcoming funding opportunities. There you'll also find the buttons that will guide you over to our submittable portal where you can start completing applications. I did want to mention that you will have to create a submittable account, and I encourage you to use your organizational email address for the organization that you're submitting the grant for. If you are a past grantee and already have a submittable account, you can go ahead and just reuse the same account. That way we keep all the information together. And our grants platform does work best on Google Chrome, Firefox, or Safari, and Internet Explorer is not supported, so please keep that in mind. And there are some benefits to us having an entirely electronic grants process now. And one of them is that once you log in and create the application, you can click invite collaborators and invite other folks from your organization to help support complete the form. And there is no limit to the collaborators that you can invite. And the other feature is that there is an autosave feature that allows you to save drafts and come back to that to finish them whenever you want. I'm going to cover a little bit more about those once I jump into the portal. And I did want to mention before I do, though, that if the application is not accessible to your needs, please contact us so that we can figure out how to best support you. We want to be accessible, and we want folks to feel comfortable reaching out to us and letting us know what those specific needs are so that we can address them. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the application. So I have an account. I'm going to go ahead and sign in. If you don't have an account from that portal, it'll ask you to create an account. And once you've signed in and you're looking at the general application, this is what you'll see. The first thing that I want you to notice is that here is the invite collaborators button, and here is where the original drafter of the application will be able to invite other folks from the organization to come and support drafting this. I did want you to keep in mind that only the person who drafts the original copy of the application will be able to submit. So collaborators will not be able to submit the application. And the submitter will also be the main point of contact for us for the grant. So just please keep that in mind as you're determining who's going to be the original drafter of the application. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that we have linked a submittable article to show you what saving a draft look like and how to access it once you've saved the draft and you want to come back and do that work. Additionally, I did mention that the application has an autosave feature, but we do still encourage you all to save often, and I'll show you where that save draft button is at the bottom of the application when we get to it. Additionally, we do encourage folks to, if you can and have the capabilities, to work offline. So have the questions in a Word doc, for example, and then draft your answers on the Word doc. It's rare, but there have been instances where folks come back and some of their work is missing, and we don't want that to happen. So I'm putting that out there, and I do encourage you to save often and work offline if you can. The other thing that I have linked here is the Submittable Resource Center, which is full of helpful videos and articles for submitters like yourselves. I encourage you to explore their articles with regards to any technical questions that you may have as you're going through the portal and filling out your proposal. Once you start the application, you'll see the name of the application, of course, the grant funding period. And then we do have a couple more links for you. The first is a link to our funding guidelines and priorities, which will take you back to our website so that you can have those open, especially when you're drafting your application narrative, which we'll get into in a moment. And then the other is a checklist, application checklist that is downloadable, and you can download and print it, and it's a tool that you can use to prepare to fill out the application and ensure that you have ample time to gather any documents or any information that you will need. There's also little clues that we have scattered throughout the application. One of them, for example, is this red asterisk. Any questions with the red asterisk are going to be required questions. We have word limits available underneath the boxes for you to notice what the word limits are as well. And then finally, in addition to the question, we have gone in and added additional hints to let you know what exactly the question is seeking. I do encourage you to pay special attention to those hints when you see them so that you can get a good idea of what exactly we're looking for in that question. So the first section is the general information question, and the first question is asking you to draft a summary of your proposal that addresses the following, and it has 4 different questions that we're asking you to answer. And I will say, I actually encourage folks to fill this specific summary out at the end once you've completed the rest of the application, so that it's easier for you to draft that summary as opposed to working backwards. And this summary specifically we asked for is because the grant making committee will have access to your entire application. However, this summary will be shared with the Fund for Santa Barbara's board of directors. And as I mentioned, you don't have to go in order with any of these questions. You can skip around, and I do encourage you to come back and fill this one out towards the end. Contact information is simple. We'll ask for the submitter's contact information. This will be the main point of contact for us. We'll ask you for your organization information, the name of the organization as it appears in the IRS exempt organization list. If you're an unincorporated group, just use your group name. And then for project name, this just means give your request a name, whatever your request is, give it a name. We'll ask you if your organization has tax exempt status, either 501c3 or 501c4. If you do have tax exempt status, you'll just select yes, and then we'll ask you what exactly the tax exempt status is. If you don't have tax exempt status, you'll click on no, and then we'll ask you if you're applying with a fiscal sponsor. If you do have a fiscal sponsor, you can say yes, and then we'll ask you for the tax exempt status of your fiscal sponsor. However, if you do not have a tax exempt status and you are not applying with a fiscal sponsor, then we'll give you the option to apply as unincorporated. And I did want to note that if you are applying with unincorporated status, this clue box will pop up asking you or letting you know that you will need an EIN. And then you'll also be asked to submit a statement of charitable purpose later on in the application. If you, the statement of charitable purpose, it's just a paragraph letting us know how your group is working with a charitable purpose pretty much. And then in that section below where we do ask for it, we give more clues about that as well. For this example, I'm gonna go ahead and pretend that I'm applying as a C4. We'll ask for your organization address. And then we'll ask if you receive mailing at or correspondence at this address. And if you do, you can say yes. And if you don't, you can say no. And then we'll ask for your actual mailing address for any correspondence related to this proposal. And then we'll ask for your organization phone number, website if you have it, social media handle if you have it. And then finally, we'll ask for your organization bank account information. So who do we make the check payable to? And as I mentioned, if you have tax exempt status or are applying as unincorporated, we'll ask you for your bank account, and you'll put the bank account information there as well as your financial institution information. If you're applying with a fiscal sponsor, then the fiscal sponsor's information will be what goes in here, the account information for the fiscal sponsor and the financial institution. Moving along. We'll ask for a very, very short, brief summary of what exactly the funds will pay for. And then as you see, there's a little clue there as well. And then we'll ask you for the amount that you are requesting. And then we'll ask you to tick off that you know that the funding period is for 12 months. And then we'll ask you the type of request that you're submitting, whether it's general operating support or if it's a program or project. And then we'll ask you if the request has received funding from the fund in the past, and then your total request budget. So if your request is for a specific program and it's a program that you have calculated that it's going to need $50,000 in order for the program to take place, then that's would be your total request budget. However, if your request is for general operating support, that would be supporting the organization as a whole. In that case, your total request budget and your total organizational budget would be the same budget when you're seeking general operating support. And then we'll ask for the budget period start and end. And then we'll also ask for your fiscal year start. Please stop me if I'm moving too fast or if anyone has any questions. And then we'll go down to issue areas that are specific to your request. So these are issue areas that you're going to be working on or addressing with your request. You can select some of the ones that we have here, or if you are not seeing the specific issue area that you plan to be employing or working on, then you can select other and then tell us what your issue areas are here. You'll have the other option for all of these sections here. So you can, if you're not seeing, for example, the strategy that you want to be employing, you can go ahead and let us know what that is by selecting other here. And then strategies are, of course, the overall strategies that you will be using to carry out your proposed work. And then the constituency, this is the constituency that you're going to be targeting with the request that you are submitting. And finally, the geography. If proposing work that is going to be held countywide, then you can just select countywide and move on. However, if you are working specifically for a community in North County, then you can select North County and then tick off where exactly in North County you're going to be conducting that work. Moving along, we'll then move into the site visit information. So we'll ask you if the submitter, the contact information you previously gave, is the person who should be contacted to make site visit arrangements. If that's the person, then you'll just say yes and then move on. But if that's not the person, you can say no, and then we'll ask you who exactly we should be contacting. Sometimes this comes in handy if your organization or group maybe has a grant writer or a specific person who's submitting the draft but isn't the program officer, for example, and the program officer is the better contact for the site visit. And then we'll ask you for the best days and times for site visit interview. And I'm going to cover more about the site visit shortly, but I did want to mention very quickly that the site visits are held by our grant making committee. And because a lot of them they're all volunteers and a lot of them have day jobs, we encourage you to put at least one or two or a couple evening options in addition to daytime options, so that they have different scheduling abilities and they can play the Tetris game with you all. All right, we're going to move into the application narrative. And for the application narrative portion, I want you to focus on answering the specific questions that are being asked and draft succinct answers. I encourage you to break down the questions and specifically answer what is being asked so that you don't get lost in the weeds. Remember that the grant making committee members read all of the applications and you don't want them to have to sift through fluff words, and you want them to be able to understand your proposal well and articulate why they support it. And then just as a note for best practices, please avoid using acronyms. There have been proposals that have been submitted with acronyms, and sometimes the grant making committee can get a little bit lost when they don't understand what exactly the acronym means. First, we'll ask you to outline your proposal, and this is the opportunity for you to give us all the background information and lay down the foundation for your request. Summarize how your request came to be and what the specifics of the request are. And make sure that here you really understand the guidelines and priorities and talk about the strategies that you're going to be employing or plan to employ with this request.
And
I see Patricia came off mute.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in and give Tanya a little voice break. And
thank you.
Questions, of course. So the second question is really kind of what we've been talking about throughout what we've been referencing. So how is this social change versus direct service? Remember that we're looking to support projects with a strong social change component. Here you'll want to connect the dots between social change component of your project and how you're addressing the root cause of social inequities. Be explicit about how this request is promoting social change. The grant making committee will prioritize projects that address systems change, education, and direct service can be a component of projects, but it cannot encompass, it can't stand alone. Enhancing community capacity to build and mobilize power. So that question, the grant making committee will prioritize projects that promote movement building and coalition building. Are you working to bridge the gap between silos and working together with other groups? We want to see how you're partnering with other organizations and who are doing similar work. This question is asking you to show that you know the community, be transparent. Again, you're familiar with who the other players are. Again, if you're not working with other groups, please be explicit about how your work differs from from other organizations that might be doing similar work. If there's been challenges in working with other groups for whatever reason, we want to hear about that. And so please don't feel like that is that would disqualify you or not make your proposal rise to the top. You need to be explicit in this area. I think it's more important to express that you really understand who the other players are doing the same work. So let's see. The next question is, describe your organizational structure and governance. How are decisions made and priorities set? And how is your constituency involved in decision-making process? So again, we're referring to constituency-led work. At the fund, we understand that social conditions improve most dramatically when those who've been denied power and social injustice lead on their own behalf to confront, challenge, and change conditions that have denied them access to justice and equity. Talk about how involved your constituency is in the decision-making process and how they affect the work that you do. In this top-down project, are you engaged? Is this a top-down project, or are you engaging constituency and incorporating their voices in the process? Are you working directly with the community to move this project forward, or are you being prescriptive and telling them what they need? The grant making committee will prioritize projects with community buy-in and partnerships where the constituency is part of the decision-making group. They do not want to see projects where people from the community are not involved. So just keeping this in mind as you're all ideas start someplace. It could be, you know, at 3 o'clock in the morning when you wake up, or at a kitchen table or in a conversation, but you want to make sure that you have community buy-in and you're pulling in the people that are most effective. And so then we'll also ask you, moving on, so we'll ask you for 2 references. So please provide 2 references who understand your project and can speak to it. And then we'll jump into the activity timeline. A good way to differentiate between these, so we want, you know, what your objective is, you know, what you're going to do and what you'd like to accomplish, like what are the goals, and to differentiate between the activity and the objective is like the activity is how you're going to do it. So the objective is what's the goal, what do you want to accomplish, and then the activity is how you're going to get there. The activities should help you achieve your objectives. And activities and objectives should also support the narrative of the proposal. As you're completing your timeline, you should also be thinking about your budget. I encourage you to work on these together and connect the dots between the 2. As you're identifying your activities, think about how much your activity will cost so that it leads directly into your budget. Tanya is going to go over that a little bit more when we go into the budget part of the application. And then moving on, anticipated outcomes and evaluation. For this question, think about what is going to be different by virtue of your carrying out this request. What is the change that you seek to make, and how will you evaluate whether the change took place? What is going to be different in your organization, and what's going to be different in your constituency? What's going to be different in the community? That's not to say that, like, if your goal is to have, you know, to address violence in the community, and there continues to be violence, incidents, as you're working to every large goal, like world peace, has a smaller goals to get there. So please make sure that you talk about how the needle has moved. So applicants get to set their own determinants of success. So you get to say what your goals are, and you get to say how you're going to evaluate it. So evaluations can be simple, and it doesn't have to be elaborate. Any pre and post information is helpful to give us an idea of the shift that you expect to see. Tell us what your starting point is and where you expect to be at the end, and how you will evaluate that. Also talk about potential challenges. I mean, this is a good place to be very realistic about some of the heavy issues that some of you all will be tackling. And then, of course, we understand that the outcomes look different for each project. We want you to tell us what they look like to you. They can be general goals. We will outreach to X amount of Latinx citizens in the community and provide them with voter information. Be clear and realistic, and have feasible goals there. Next question. So how will the benefits and outcomes strengthen your organization's mission, and how will you keep the benefits going? Talk about how this project relates to the overall goals of your organization. Articulate how it relates to your organization's mission, and connect the dots, and make sure that you connect the dots for the grant making committee. This project does not have to be an ongoing project, but if it is, tell us what your plan is to keep the benefits ongoing. So there are some groups that just see that there's a need. I always like to use it like the stop sign in a community. If someone sees that there's a need for a stop sign in a community because it's a safety issue, they come together, they advocate to get a stop sign put in. They go to city council, they go through all the steps, they get the stop sign put in, and they could be done. Or they might realize their power and decide that they want to continue working on other projects. So jumping into the financial information, identify major funding strategies for this request. The strategy is your plan of action to raise funds for the request. The activity is the specific ways in which the strategies are carried out. For example, engaging your board in committing to providing monthly financial contributions. This specific example also shows that you have buy-in from your board and they have a vested interest in the work that you're proposing. Again, I just want to elevate that we are not asking this question because we expect that you have a whole development department, or that you're going to dedicate yourself full-time to fundraising for this project. But it does speak to community buy-in, whether it's from your board or whether it's from community, that they're investing in this project. Okay. And resources, do you have what access to resources do you have and need? This question is funky. So just tell us about what are the resources that you have access to? What kind of buy-in does community have? Do you have access to community space? Maybe another organization is letting you borrow meeting space. Maybe another organization is letting you use office space. So clearly it doesn't have to be monetary support. It could be in-kind donations. This is an opportunity for you to kind of share about how you've been resourceful and creative with resources that are available to you. Tell us what resources you need. So we also want to hear about what resources you need. This doesn't necessarily mean that we can address all those needs and that you have, but it does help us advocate for you on your behalf when we are networking with other foundations and community partners. It also helps us identify what sort of workshops and offerings to bring to you. This could be something like onboarding, board governance, training, how to fundraise, how to outreach. Those are the sorts of needs that you might have that we might be able to bring workshop offerings to. And again, encourage you to reach out to Kathleen, our capacity billing manager, and she might be able to provide you with technical assistance directly or connect you with resources to help answer your questions. And I'm going to pass it off again to Tanya to talk about the budget. And I'm going to plug in my computer because it's about to die.
Thanks, Patricia. All right, so yes, we made it to the financial information table. And very quickly, I do want to note that the financial information table is divided into two sections. The first section is the income section, and then the second section is the expenses. Remember earlier when Patricia mentioned that your activity timeline and your budget should correlate? This is where you translate your activities into dollars. I recommend keeping a running sheet as you're identifying the activities you plan to do and thinking about the specifics of what you are going to need and how much it's going to cost you. This can be, personnel, supplies, etc. This is the financial information table that you will have to fill out in the application. And I've actually gone ahead and also created a sample that I want to run through with you very quickly to give you an idea of what a filled out sample will, or a filled out table would look like. So let me go ahead and pull that up. And I mimicked it to look exactly like it looks inside the application, but this one has a little bit more clues. So first, as I mentioned, the top section is the income section. Oh, and just as an FYI, this sample is for a general support request. And we have possible funding sources listed here in yellow to give you an idea of what those can be, but obviously it's not all inclusive. There's others and you're welcome to add yours. That actually reflect the truth of your projects or your request. We always fill out the top one with the Fund for Santa Barbara, and here you'll add your requested amount, and then we put that it's pending in 2022. And then I've added a government grant, foundation grant, individual contributions and donations, and then a fundraising event. And because this is a general operating support sample, this is also my total organizational budget. And I want to note that the total income and the total expenses amounts should be the same. So the second section is the expenses amount. And these are some sample categories that I've added in here for you all to take a look at. And then the most important part here is actually the notes and explanation section. And sorry. The notes and explanation section is the space where you can tell the grant making committee exactly what your needs are and what the request would be paying for. It really goes a long way to use your explanation section to your full advantage and give them as much detail and breakdown as possible. The third column is the amount that you're requesting from the fund for that specific expense category. Notice that because it's an all-inclusive budget of my organization, some things are going to be included that I'm actually not requesting any money from the fund for. And then this number, the amount requested from the fund, should not exceed $10,000, as that is our maximum request amount, and it should match the amount that your request or your proposal is requesting. Keep those numbers in mind. And then finally, in the application itself, you'll notice that there's a bottom bar that has a little zero, and this little zero works as an amount match verification. As I mentioned, this amount needs to match this amount, and if they are matching, then this number will balance itself out to zero. You don't have to do anything with it. If your amounts are not matching, this number will tell you what the difference is and why they're not matching, and we'll ask you to go back and correct it. Let me give it a second. There it is. sample that I just shared with you is linked here underneath the financial information table so that you have access to it and can look at it as you're going through and filling out your own. And then, of course, we've added some clues. All of these clues are referencing things that I just mentioned to you. Provide detailed notes, the total income in section 1 must match the total expenses in section 2, the amount requested from the fund must not exceed $10,000, and so on and so forth. Once you're done completing that, we'll ask you to verify that this number here is auto summing and balancing out at 0. Sorry, I just saw this question. Can this sample be shared? Yes, it's shared. And another question, are we listing potential grants that have not been approved? Yes, you are. You're listing any sources of income pending or received that are going to be for your specific request. You'll see I have a couple pending ones here. And so if the total income and expenses do balance out and match at 0, then you'll select yes. And if they do not, we'll tell you to go back and please make those numbers match. Sorry. And then we'll ask you to confirm that the total amount requested from the funds does not exceed $10,000. That would be this number here, and that it matches the amount requested in your proposal. You'll go ahead and confirm that. And one thing that I forgot to mention is when you're listing out your expenses and items and categories, you'll want to put them in order of priority. And just to be super clear on our end, we'll also ask you to list your top 3 priority items and your highest budget priority items here. And then finally, we'll ask you to include any past funding sources for this request, any grants or events or other fundraising activities that have taken place to support this current request that you're submitting the proposal for. All right. Now we're at the additional information section, and the additional information section will vary depending on whether you're applying as a tax-exempt organization with a fiscal sponsor or as an unincorporated group. And I'll go ahead and highlight those as we're going through. The first thing is that all organizations will have to list a list of all key participants involved in your request. So you'll go ahead and put that information here. And then we'll ask for a list of the board of directors of the governing body of your organization. So if you'll recall at the beginning, I had said that I was sample applying as a C4. So this is, I have a C4, I have a board. This is where my board goes. If I am applying as an unincorporated group, this is a list of the governing body, so the leadership of my group in the unincorporated group. And then, see, there's that clue there for you. Then we'll ask you for a list of the board of directors for the tax-exempt organization that is acting as a fiscal sponsor. If you are not applying with a fiscal sponsor, you can ignore this. And then tax-exempt organizations and those applying with a fiscal sponsor will be asked to submit an IRS letter of determination and a California Franchise Tax Board letter of determination. We have some samples linked for you here so you can see exactly what the form that we're looking for looks like. And then we also have some clues for different websites that you can visit to gather that information for your organization as well. And here I'll pause just to say that if I were applying as an unincorporated group, you would not be asked to submit either of these forms. This is where that statement of charitable purpose would pop up instead. And then we'll just ask you to type in a brief paragraph of how your organization is acting with a charitable purpose. Finally, we'll ask for an optional attachment, and this is any attachment of your choice that will help the grant making committee better understand your organization or your request. Last part of the application is the disclaimer and agreement. The first section is for you to fill out and just certify that the information in the application is true and accurate, and that the application is being submitted with either the board of directors full knowledge, or in the case of the unincorporated group, the governing body's full knowledge. And then we'll also ask you to send an endorsement to a member of the board of directors for tax-exempt organizations, a member of the board of directors for those of you applying with a fiscal sponsor. This is going to be sent to a member of the board of directors of the organization that is acting as a fiscal sponsor. And if you're applying as unincorporated, this is going to be sent to someone in the governing body of the leadership group of your unincorporated group. Very quickly, here is that save draft button that I mentioned earlier. This is where you would scroll down to save to manually save a draft. I'm sure you noticed the little pop-up that kept popping up here every couple seconds, telling me that the draft had been automatically saved. And then finally, if my application were complete, I could select reapply. Sorry, alarms. I could select to apply and submit my application this way. I'm going to pause there. We just went through a lot. Are there any questions from filling out the application that I can answer at the moment? Okay, well, if anything does come up, Patricia and I are always available either here at the FAQ or via email later on if something else pops up later. Thanks. Yes, Shirley, we will make this recording available. All right, going back to our PowerPoint then. There's just a couple more slides. Let me move this forward. So one thing I haven't told you about that I did want to mention is that the fund offers a free optional pre-application review. And this is where staff members like myself and Patricia will review your proposed request and share any feedback that hopefully could be useful in filling out your application. And this we strongly encourage you to take advantage of if you're having trouble determining whether your project or your request meets the guidelines or meets the fund's requirements. And in order to take advantage of this opportunity, we asked you to submit a one-page summary max of what you're trying to accomplish, a list of all your key organizers and participants, a draft of your budget, and we asked you submit this by email to grants@Fund4Santa Barbara by 5 p.m. on August 22nd. I encourage you to submit it sooner if you have this if you are wanting to take advantage of this so that you have the feedback back sooner rather than later so you can keep working on your application. And then site visits I touched upon briefly, but I did want to go and give you a little bit more details about what these are. They come later in the cycle, and during the first screening meeting, the grant making committee members determine who will be receiving a site visit. If your project is selected for a site visit, the grant making committee members themselves will contact you directly to set your site visit up. The site visit teams on our end at the fund, it's going to constitute 2 grant making committee members and 1 fund staff member, and they'll ask to meet with 3 to 4 members of your organization of your choice. And I did want to say that site visit can be a little bit misleading. You don't need to have a physical space in order to set this up. This is more of an interview so that the grant making committee members can learn more about your request in your own words and get to know who the key players in your request are. And then, yeah, they can be either virtual or in person at a location of your choice, determined between you and the grant making committee members. And those will be taking place between September 28th and October 19th. Yeah, so a little bit later down the road, but that can lead us into the cycle timeline. And this gives you an overview of where exactly the cycle goes and how it gets there. So we're currently here at grant application workshops. This is the final workshop of the 3 that we held this week. The optional pre-application review deadline will be on August 22nd. The proposal deadline is a week later on August 29th. Site visits take place between September 28th and October 19th. And then public announcements of grantees are made on November 30th, and fund disbursement happens in December along with the grant award celebration. This cycle timeline is available on our website in the grantee portal for download so that you can keep that for your records and can reference it anytime, along the way. And finally, if you are selected to receive a grant, you'll be asked to submit 2 grant reports, a progress report that is due in 6 months after receiving the grant, and then a final report due 12 months after receiving the grant. That is it for me. Now we can open it up to Q&A, and I can go ahead and answer any questions that you may have.